Hey there, Amplifiers. Manny Torres here, and I'm excited to have my guest today, Diane Hallenbeck. She is president of the Inspired Road and also author of the upcoming book, Rejecting Fear. In this new book, Diane shows you how to triage your heart, reject fear, recapture joy in your life, and start down a path of healing and hope you never thought was possible. Welcome to the show. Great to see you, Diane.
Thanks so much. Great for having me.
Excited. Well, I'm really excited to talk about your book. It touches on things that a lot of us deal with, and I'm excited to jump into that with you. Why don't you start us off by telling us a little bit more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so I live up in New Hampshire, New England. We're just finding spring right now. It's really cold up here still. But raised 5 kids, started this business 2 years ago. I'm a coach. So I work with executives and high-level business owners who basically are struggling with their why. They're struggling with dealing with emotion. They're also struggling with just kind of the ability to choose the life that they want to live, whether it's work-life balance, or maybe they're struggling with anger or grief. So there's all different emotions that people are struggling with. And I just found this process that worked for my different clients with different issues. And so I wrote the process in a book. So it's my coaching process. And it's actually the willingness to choose what we believe, what we tell ourselves, and how we kind of rekindle our story over and over again. It isn't always the best story that we tell ourselves. So it's hard to believe we actually have a choice of what we think. It's kind of revolutionary. Yeah.
That is revolutionary, and it's probably easier said than done. And most recently, the last few years has been a lot of stress and pressure on people. And what we've started to see is people opening up a little bit more, but still there's that stigma for opening up and being vulnerable. What do you say to people who are experiencing that? Maybe they know that there's something wrong, or they feel that there may be something that they need to address, but they have that fear of not wanting to be vulnerable, or they don't want to be seen as weak. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, I think the most interesting part about emotions is that if we don't process them, we carry them with us. And so I think it's the stronger person who actually can say, I feel angry, or I feel sad, or I feel frustrated, and really to look at core emotions and to be able to unpack them so that we can move forward with all the weight of the emotions. And emotions and thoughts are so tied together. And I think what happens is that people think that they are the feeling, but they're actually needing a way to process the emotions. So even if you just take depression, it is such a debilitating disease. And in our culture, anxiety and depression is rampant, and especially in the younger generation. But I think what needs to happen is that, yes, we go to counseling and we do medication, everything that we need to do to function, but we also have to unpack the story that feeds that emotion, that feeds that issue within our own lives. And so as far as being vulnerable, it's really challenging, but I think it's the open door to freedom and walking in a different way in life.
That's wonderful. And I've experienced it in my life, dealing with, friends, connections, coworkers, with clients, with pretty much everyone. You see that a lot of people are dealing with things, and I've made it my own, I guess, purpose to be more open and forthright to talk to people. As you interact with people, or what suggestions do you have for people to, they can't do it all at once. So how can they slowly start to build that muscle and that strength and that habit of, tuning into their mental state and the exercise that they can do to improve that?
Yeah, one of my clients was struggling with grief. Her parents had both died. It's in the book. The story is in chapter 3 of the book, Engaging Your Emotions. And I finally just said to her, look, just take some time and a cup of coffee in the morning and 15 minutes and just write in a journal. It's so simple: a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and just do a check-in. Like, a lot of people are starting to practice mindfulness, and that's great. But you also have to connect what's in your mind with what's in your heart. So I almost want to call it heartfulness, right? Like, it isn't just mindfulness, but we have to say, how am I feeling right now about what's in my mind, right? So that I can work through it. So So I would just suggest, honestly, if you can't take 15 minutes, take 5 minutes in the morning with a cup of coffee and just say, how am I feeling right now? And not to become self-absorbed. That's not the goal, but really the goal is to sort of check in, and it's almost like taking the pressure valve off when you're like canning things. Sometimes you use a pressure cooker. And I think emotionally, so many of us are living with the pressure cooker of what's happening in Ukraine. What is Russia going to do? And all of this fear that we can't control. But the fear we can control is the emotions that we have inside. We can kind of quiet that. We can't change the world, but we can change within us.
I love that. And I love the fact that you talk about anchoring it with an activity that you're already doing, something that's
Yes,
consistent, because then the likelihood of you doing that and making a habit that you stick with increases. So it's wonderful to find that one thing that you're doing every day that you can tie into it. And the great part is, I would assume, the people that have gone through this probably feel a lot of positivity with that. And now they start to, associate that positive feeling with that other habit. So now every time they smell coffee, maybe they have a positive thought
that's right.
process that comes through. So I love that.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned, some of the fear of things going on in the world, and your book title is Rejecting Fear. What role does fear play in our lives?
Well, fear is a driver. And so I really do believe you can only be driven by one of two things. You either are driven by fear or you're driven by love. There's just really only two ways to go. When you wake up in the morning, you're either kind of moving towards positive or you're moving towards, it's more towards light or towards darkness. And so the role that fear is playing and how it drives us is that it basically makes us feel trapped and makes us feel like the hallway, the journey we're on is getting darker and darker and smaller, where I cannot change what's happening in the cities in Ukraine, but I can kind of, and it's a coping mechanism, but I sort of distance myself so that I can feel safe, so that I had to do this during the pandemic. I had to start going for 1 hour walks outside just to kind of be grounded and be a little bit distant from the chaos and the uncertainty, because those create fear within us. So the things I can't control, I sort of set them outside of myself. And I just say, okay, what's happening inside of me? What am I afraid about in my own life right now? And I just sort of deal with those fears and emotions, because I don't want to be driven by fear. I'm going to be afraid of things, but I don't want it to be my internal driver. My internal driver has to be a little more calm and a little more towards love. Well, I can bring jam to my neighbor. I can, make a nice dinner. We only can control what we can control. And that's what we have to make sure that all within us isn't driven by fear.
Hey there, this is Kenny from Growth Amplifiers, here to ensure you get your awesome ideas into action to grow and improve your business and achieve your full potential. Take the first step by visiting growthamplifiers.com and clicking the Start Here button. Take the assessment to get your personalized score. Then select from free resources to learn how to improve your score. Don't wait. Be proactive and take action now by visiting growthamplifiers.com and clicking the Start Here button. And always keep on amplifying. Now, let's get back to the show.
It's interesting. As you were describing that, I had a visualization of, say, an athlete, say like Michael Jordan, when he's at the free throw line, and it's obviously not the same types of circumstances, but he zones out everything else and focuses on the one thing he's trying to accomplish. And whether it's fear or just distractions, it still holds true in your life. Like if you can really zone in and focus on what you're trying to achieve, you can have that success. It's when you allow those external items to come in and fluster you, is when you stumble, when you can't get things done. So I really like the way that you talked about, focusing on what you can control, zeroing in and silencing all the other noise. So I think that's a great example of how you can reject that fear and start taking those baby steps to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really fabulous. It's amazing. We have to realize that we have the choice of what we think about, what we're choosing in our minds, and whether we choose to engage difficult emotions like fear, frustration, anger, all of that.
That's great. I have two little boys, Alex and Drew, and that's one thing. My youngest one, Drew, is very emotional. And I always talk to him. I say, you can't control what other people do, but you can control how you react. And he had a tendency to always, react immediately. So he's learned to take himself outside the situation, kind of breathe, regather his thoughts, and then, try to process it. And it's fun to, well, it's not fun, but it's rewarding to see him work through it. And it's much easier for me to work with him than it is to work for myself. But I love the tools and exercises that you provide to help people through that, because I think that's what they need. They need someone guiding them through that process so that they can improve.
Yeah. And one other thing to really add, and you could add this to your son as well, is it also matters the story that we tell ourselves. So say you're in a little argument with somebody like your son, and so you think this, they're taking this and they're doing this, and people are doing things to me, right? And instead you change the story you tell yourself, right? So instead of, I'm a victim, which is definitely a big part of like where fear is driven by trauma and all different things. Instead you can say, I'm here now today. What do I want to do? Right. Or maybe these children don't want to play with me, but I can go over here. And so you begin to take the power back in your own life, and it makes a huge difference for how you engage life even. So kind of fun, even for a small child.
I love that. I'm going to be able to practice that with Drew and see how it works. I'm sure that he'll enjoy that. You talk a little bit about that tool, but what else can we do to reject fear, and how can we strengthen our courage and our willpower so that we can, be stronger human beings?
Yep. In the first chapter of the book, it's a really simple but very challenging exercise that I give, is that for a whole day, just write down your thoughts. So starting with, I'm going to be late to work, I can't believe, and just every little random thought that goes through your mind. And you try to just keep it, like some people keep a food journal, try to keep a thought journal for a day. And at the end of the day, you literally label thoughts as accept or reject. So all the thoughts that lead you to hope and joy and light and energy, you put an A next to those. And all the thoughts that lead you to criticizing yourself or being angry or frustrated or afraid, you put an R next to those. And you literally begin to choose only the thoughts that bring you kind of hope, really, love, peace. And so it seems really, really difficult until you watch yourself go to the places where certain thoughts take you. So again, one of my clients was struggling with her marriage ended, and her main thought was, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. And so we started to unpack that one thought that ran through her mind, and especially watch thoughts that are recurring. And so the way to strengthen yourself in this is just to notice your thoughts, and especially write down the repetitive ones, and then say, when I think the thought, it's all my fault about my marriage ending, where does the thought take me? I feel hopeless. I feel powerless. I feel rejected, all of these things. And logically, she knew that the marriage ending wasn't her fault, but her feelings were driving this one recurring thought. And finally, she realized that that thought took her so far away from a life that she wanted to cultivate. So she started just not listening to it. I mean, it's so simple. Like you just put an A for accept, an R for reject, and now I choose different thoughts. It's the most difficult muscle to exercise, this one that I can choose my thoughts. But once you do, you realize that you actually have the power to change the trajectory of your life. And that's what happened to this client. She completely did a 180 and started on a journey that she absolutely loves, which
That's great. And, again, talking about Drew, he's my emotional son. He's the one that loves theater. And he talked about like getting on a stage, and he's like, I'm nervous. He didn't say anxiety, but he was like scared. I said, Drew, that's not you being scared, that's you being excited. So it's the same physiological feelings that you're going to have, but the association, as you mentioned, the story that you put behind it is the difference. So how do you channel that from being a negative to a positive? And I love the way that you framed that, and how, just by doing that, you can really change the story that you're telling yourself, your outlook, your possibility, what's available to you moving forward. So I think that's beautiful. And I think it's a message that more people need to hear.
Yeah. It's pretty exciting.
Well, Diane, I'm super excited, and I want to be able to share with other people how they can connect with you, how they can find the book, Rejecting Fear. What's the best way for them to connect with you and to find the book if they want more information?
Yep. So you can find me on the inspiredroad.com, just those 3 words, theinspiredroad.com. That's my website. And also the book is live on Amazon. So it's crazy. If you just go to amazon.com and you search Rejecting Fear, the book will pop up and you can buy it today.
Excellent. Well, we'll add those links in the show notes. Diane, it was a pleasure chatting today. Look forward to flexing my muscles on trying to reject fear a little bit more, having more positivity, and, shine more light in the world. So I appreciate you being here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
To show your support, take a moment to amplify this message by sharing it online. To connect with me or gain more business growth insights, visit www.growthamplifiers.com. Thank you for your support.